Do you wonder about past lives? Have you ever thought about where your soul has been, where it's going, or what lessons and memories have been gathered along the way? In this podcast, we will discuss past life memories, psychic phenomena, energy healing, and other metaphysical topics with experts and the average person to find out how we can heal through these experiences. So I invite you to join me on my journey. Welcome to the Regression Session. No, this is just, we're recording right now, but.
Welcome back to the Regression Session. My name is Arturo, and I love this show.
Welcome to the Regression Session to seasoned listeners and new listeners. Thanks for checking out the show. This week, we're going to be hearing from Candace Craw-Goldman. And Candace and I had a very interesting discussion about the spiritual awakening that we believe mankind is currently experiencing. We also talk a little bit about like hypnosis techniques and stuff and how the practitioner can kind of assist with the trance state. Super interesting conversation. I'm really excited to share it with you all. A couple things before we get into the actual interview. If you want to come on the show and share your knowledge about any metaphysical topic or just your past life memories, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com. Head on over to my Facebook page, etc., links in the description. And now my interview with Candace. Hey Candace, thanks for coming on to the show.
Hi, Ian. I really looked forward to today. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, me too. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on my show. And before we get talking again, I would, like I said, just like you to give a little bit of context as to who you are, what you got going on, just so the people who don't know you can get to know you from you.
Sure. Well, my name's Candace Craw-Goldman, and I'm the founder of a couple of things. One is quantumhealers.com. That's a website where healers get together, gather, support each other, but we also have a directory on there so the public can actually find us. Quantum healers being regressionists such as yourself, but all kinds of energy healers and alternative healers, etc. I'm also the founder and creator of a regression method called a BQH, or Beyond Quantum Healing. That was developed and released in 2018. But a lot of people know me because of who I used to work with. And I was so blessed and honored to be able to sit with her and teach with her. And that is the late, great Dolores Cannon. I met her in 2014. Which is this incredible made-for-a-movie experience, how that all happened. And I had a regression with her myself. I learned her method, and that was in the summer of 2014. Or excuse me, you know what? I misspoke. 2008 is when I when I met Dolores. Dolores passed in 2014. So the numbers just came out of my mouth funny there. But in the summer of 2008, is when I met her, took her class, had a session with her. And by the end of that year, I was working with her by assisting her practitioners. And then I began assisting her in classes and program development after that. And I did so until 2014. And then things sort of expanded from there after she passed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, I'm not going to say everybody, but most people that are, I'm going to say practitioners or healers, know who Dolores Cannon is and was. And that's fantastic. So what I would like to hear about is, everybody talks about Dolores Cannon with you, like I was saying. I'm sure you're always like, well, let's talk about Dolores, but I want to talk about Candace Craw-Goldman, and I want to talk about BQH, because I want to talk about because my show is all about healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I want people to listen to my show and be like, okay, I have anxiety or whatever. What can I do to feel better, right? And BQH is an amazing modality that I've heard of across the board, and I have here at my disposal the creator of BQH. So if you don't mind just going into a little bit of like the history of BQH, how it works, some of the results you've seen, some of the miracles you have witnessed while doing it, et cetera, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, we all stand on shoulders of giants, and BQH couldn't have come into existence without all of those years studying and working with Dolores Cannon. But Dolores had her own way of teaching, her own way of explaining, and her own, lines around the box of what her method was. And that was fine. She was the teacher. But I remember as I was helping her explain concepts and she was guiding new students, I remember in my mind for a number of years thinking that I didn't agree with absolutely everything. And I started to have my own ideas about some of the approaches in this kind of regression work. And I kept them all to myself because this was her deal, right? This was her class, and that was fine. And I was there to support her. And I didn't impose my ideas or my expansions upon Dolores or her method. Actually, it took 4 years. It took 4 years after her death before I finally kind of felt comfortable to go, you know what? It's time. It's time to just kind of open up from the way I'd been working, because for a full 4 years after her death, I primarily just continued to practice her method. But so what are the ways that it's different, and what are some of the new things and some of the expansions? Well, you and I were talking about it right before we started. One of the things that can happen, it doesn't always, but one of the things that can happen with a practitioner and a client is the practitioner themselves can go into a space where they start having an altered experience. And I watched that, and it's far more common for some people than others. Some people have to do this work for a while before it happens to them. And for some people, it doesn't happen at all. And the thing is it doesn't make you better or worse. It's just different. It's just how people are. But primarily, most regressionists out there who come from these long-standing traditions, the Michael Newtons, the Brian Weisses, the Dolores Cannons, and all of them, and they're of a little different generation than I am, and that you are. They kept their inklings, they kept their consciousness sort of completely separate, very clinically so, right? And I am sure, as a matter of fact, I am positive that they at least partially or sometimes had these experiences as well, but they kept them to themselves. Why did they do that? Well, they wanted the clients to have what they may have considered a pure or an unaffected or unadulterated experience. And you know what? That's actually really important. And, you are there as a practitioner to assist that client with whatever they've got going on. That you are in service to them. You're absolutely in service to them. But some of the time where I find that this kind of expansion of the practitioner's consciousness can be helpful is when that client is struggling, is really, really struggling. And there's sometimes when you as a practitioner, some of this stuff is opening up, or you are feeling some of the energetics, or you are basically hearing or seeing or being imbued with whatever is really going on with these people in front of them, while they may be saying something along the lines of, I can't see anything, I can't hear anything, or I think I'm making it all up, etc. And when the practitioner themselves has sort of begun to understand that they are sharing a co-creative thing here, this thing that happens with a client and a practitioner is a co-created experience. Now you can, take whatever you want from that. You can define your roles. You can set parameters. And I actually think that's important to do. But when you begin to acknowledge that it is a co-creative thing, I say all the time, a BQH experience it's like a chemistry experiment. The client comes with their history, their energy, their expectations, their experience. So does the practitioner. Those two things combine. So what I started doing was acknowledging that does happen sometimes. And sometimes during that experience, when the client and the practitioner can communicate about it, it can be extremely helpful for the client. Now, there's dangers there. There's absolutely dangers there, or cautions. That's probably a better word to use, because I don't find that, this kind of exchange has ever been dangerous, quite frankly. And I mean, there's cautions there. Well, because of course, what you don't want, or at least not from my point of view, is the practitioner's ideas or goals to take over or influence too much what's going on with the client in front of you. And, a practitioner's ego, absolutely, and I've seen it happen, can get out of control here. Now that can, no matter how you define those parameters, but let's just take it to the place where I find that it can be very beneficial to say something when you've got a client and they're really visibly struggling, and there's something happening that you can or do as a practitioner. It's very obvious to you. And if at some point, and I encourage this in BQH, I say, whatever you do, your first goal is to have all of this information flow, all of the experience flow from the client. Absolutely. That's the way it should be. However, if there's stumbling blocks, if there's giant frustrations going on, and if you are sensing or feeling or understanding some of what's going on and you can assist the client, you're allowed to do so. And you're allowed to do so in this way by, first of all, asking if it's okay. It's just pretty basic. I have found myself in many sessions, specifically with people who say, I can't be hypnotized, or I've tried this before and it didn't work. And while they're in their experience, and if they come back and say, it's just not working, or this isn't happening, I might say something like, well, I feel as if I have a sense of what might be happening around you. Would it be all right if I shared with you, some of what I'm getting right now, some of the sensations or feelings or images or just whatever it happens to be, because it's all across the board. And almost 100% of the time they say yes, right? And what I have found almost 100% of the time is when I say, well, and then I share just a little bit, they hold on to that sometimes like a lifeline, and the relief just drops across their body, and they become relaxed, and they go, oh my God, that's what I was hearing too. But I thought I was just making it up, right? Sometimes being able to throw a client that kind of lifeline within a session is the most beautiful and amazing thing. And there's been, and then of course this can go on in a complete different direction, which is I've actually, this one was earlier this year, a session where I had a session with another practitioner, to be honest. So this may have been kind of how and why this worked. But within the session, we both felt Dolores's energy show up. And at one point, the session got so convoluted, and I just love it because, Dolores wrote 3 books called,
Right.
or 4 books, convoluted. The whole thing got so convoluted that the energy of Dolores really began so strongly speaking from my client. This was an online session, by the way. This woman happened to be in Australia, about as far away from me as you could get. And her energy was so strong, and she actually said, and changed the direction of the session. Dolores's energy through my client told me, Candace, the practitioner who's running this session, to close my eyes and go into trance and see and have a small experience within an experience of a regression session. So I went from being the practitioner to basically the client. And the client became the practitioner for a portion of our time together. And then it swapped back out again. Very convoluted, very odd. I've never had anything like that happen before. It was extraordinary. I think what it really comes down to, Ian, is that consciousness exploration, we've only just started it. It seems like we're at the tip of the iceberg, right? So with BQH, what I say is, my gosh, here's some parameters. Let's keep these things in mind. Let's really follow these ethics. But what it really is about freedom to see where we can take this. What's possible? There really are no limits, right? So BQH encourages experimentation, and it encourages always supporting the client, always having the client's best interest and good at heart, and staying in communication with the client. And some clients aren't ever going to go anywhere like that. They stay in your very basic classic mode, and most sessions are like that. So there's that freedom principle. And then there's also these other principles, which is really important. Most people don't come to BQH without having a history, right? Most of them, not all, but most of them show up because they've learned Reiki, or they've learned EFT, or they've been channeling for a while, or they've been doing some tarot card readings, or they've been doing other kinds of regression work, or just fill in the blank. Most of us are so interested, as you are, in the concept of healing that we've explored it for a while. And so what BQH says, well, gosh, you've brought all of that learning, all of those skills, all of that knowledge, all of that expansion to the table for your clients. Use it. Just use it.
And that's great, because it's like, what's going to work for Candace is not going to work for Ian, is not necessarily going to work for Billy, Bob, Joe down the road.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Everybody has different things. Like, some people are only willing to consider a tarot card reading. Some people are afraid of hypnosis because it's been stigmatized, unfortunately, by the media and Hollywood. But yeah, that's so awesome. I love the flexibility. I love the fact that you're like, you have, all this stuff that you've already done. Why don't you just build on it?
Exactly. As far as I know, there's not too many other teachers or, modalities out there that do this. It's pretty much, with some notable exceptions, I suppose, it's pretty much somebody's been doing this work for a while, sort of figures out an approach, gives it a name, sits behind a desk, writes it all out, has parameters, has rules, has boxes for you to fit in, etc., and then says, okay, you want to learn this, and then people will come, students will come, and then there's this exchange where the teacher sort of keeps the student, within those parameters. And I really, I'm excited to learn from those who've taken BQH and have sort of been set free from it, because I've learned so much too from others who have added or expanded in ways that I hadn't thought about. And it's just a joy and quite a beauty a beautiful thing to see open it up in this world. You asked about some of the miracles, and I will tell you that. Can I tell you about my last favorite story?
100%.
That
I'd
happened?
love to hear it.
Well, so there's, I don't know your audience, but I'll choose my words carefully. There's some people out there who've recently found themselves in a decision of injecting themselves with a certain substance, shall we say, that a lot of other people have had to do. And the experience did not work out well for her at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of reaction and very, very little help from the traditional conventional medical community. And we had a fabulous session, and the improvements in her life, I'm just so happy to say, were surprisingly swift, and they continue to build upon each other, and things are so much better. So I guess what I want to say about this is we don't know what humans are capable of, both on the positive end and on the negative end. But, we're creator beings. We're part of source. And if we're part of source, and if we're pieces of source or pieces of God, and we're that ineffable, undescribable giant thing that is experiencing itself through us, there truly isn't limitations, right? And we as humans, we're brought up with these limits. The limits are given to us, the parameters are given to us, the smallness is given to us through programming from our teachers and our clergy and our parents and society itself. And pretty much we all have to navigate through a society that is bound by those limitations. But in this work, in this regression work, and I don't even really like the word regression anymore, which because it's too limiting.
It's limiting. I'm right there with you. I call it spiritual hypnosis for now.
There you go. And that's why I call it BQH, Beyond Quantum Healing. And I didn't use the word regression or even hypnosis in there, because sometimes even that's limiting. But, we do the best we can. This is language, and human language has limitations. But once you really realize, and sometimes, when I've seen things change before my very eyes, I still get so excited. I'm like a little kid, right? And when you see matter sort of shift and morph in your, right in front of your face, it's a marvelous thing. And if I can see that, if I saw that, well, then anything is possible, right? And so that's what keeps me excited about this work is just really knowing that, and it's the potentials that are limitless. Now, our higher selves, our contracts, all kinds of things keep us focused on, well, what we may be here to learn, or what our life plan is, or et cetera. And some of those things might make available things that happen or that can happen versus things that won't happen. The real concern I have about any alternative healing modality, any of them, is that I hope that in general, the populace doesn't move from basically, and this is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I think it's a valid way to look at it. So if you have some issue with you will go, whether it be emotional and you go to a psychologist, or whether it be physical and you go to a conventional doctor. Our culture has kind of trained us. Well, I have something wrong with me. I go to this person or that person in the medical profession, and then that, because this person or that person, is the expert or knows more than me, I will go there and then I will get fixed. I call it sort of this fix me, I'm broken concept. And the danger, I think, of alternative healers, alternative energy healers, what we do with consciousness exploration is if somebody has a particular challenge, what I really hope isn't happening, but I see it happen a lot anyway, which is rather than, a conventional doctor couldn't help me, so I'm going to go to an alternative healer. But they come with the same thing, which is fix me, I'm broken. Now, to be fair, that's how most people end up there. It's how I ended up there. It's how I ended up with Dolores, just coming to the end of my rope and then trying everything. But once I got into this, what this really is, what it really is this creative aspect and this energetic aspect, then some of the outer walls and boundaries started to fall down, and it became a lot bigger than that. I mean, you enter as you can and where you are. But again, the thing that I would like to point out that I'm really hopeful people at least consider is the fix me, I'm broken thing shouldn't just be fix me a new kind of healer or new practitioner or energy healer because I'm broken. The idea is to step out of that altogether.
Well, to me, the idea is teach me how to fix myself. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like we're basically in a vehicle. And I think Dolores even called your body a vehicle. So we all should just be our own mechanics for our vehicle, really. And then, there's limitations to that. There's like if your car breaks down and like the axle gets busted, odds are you're going to have to take it to a body shop, right? And that's where doctors come in because we are in physical bodies, and it's, we do need, if you break your arm, there's only so much that hypnosis is going to do for you. You need to go get a cast on it, so on and so forth. But, like the things, for example, like anxiety and depression, they're not easy to deal with or to, let's just say, fix, but they're simple to address. And I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with, especially anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety in today's society. But it's quite simple to address, but the reason that people can't address it is because of what you're saying. We're trained by society or whatever you want to call it to allow ourselves to be broken, and then look for an outside solution when really the solution is inside yourself. And that's where BQH and the hypnosis and all that stuff comes into play. And we are really far down the rabbit hole, like you and me, BQH, quantum healing, QHHT, that's like really far down the rabbit hole. I have kind of a difficult question, maybe. And the question is, what's to say that in doing this work, what's to say that we're not feeding into people's delusions? What's to say that we're not creating delusions and just messing with people's heads?
It's a valid question.
Hey everyone, I'm interrupting the episode to tell you all about my Patreon campaign. I love doing this podcast, and it is amazing to hear from people telling me how much they love it too. It takes a ton of time and effort to keep producing content every single week for you guys, and I would love to put out even more for everyone to enjoy. By subscribing to a tier in my Patreon campaign, you can help support the show, provide more episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and just extra content in general. So if you enjoy the show and you feel it's worth your time listening and would like to contribute, you can go to patreon.com/The Regression Session. There's also a link in the description. Thanks so much for the support. I could never do this show without each and every one of you. Now back to the episode.
It's a valid question, and there are might be considered uncool for me to say so, but I see people in this, not many, but I see some people in this community who do that. Famously, and this one's long time ago, back in the days of Dolores. I remember somebody who took her class and then just started basically kind of stalking and trolling students from, in the dark, in the shadows, and started messing with their heads, telling them what they were doing, and why they were doing it, and just focusing on the most vile and crazy things. And he got away with it for a really long time because he was so deceitful. But I think, I know I'm kind of messing up your question here by asking this, but I don't think so in general. He was able to get away with, a lot of people have been able to get away with a lot of things, including this. We're basically talking about your intentions here, right? Your intentions. What are your real intentions? And I think intentions are, they're so important. As a matter of fact, BQH starts with this idea that you don't even start exploring until you really explore and you write out and you create a written statement of intention between both you, the practitioner, and the client. And there's a whole process in BQH that's laid out to assist people to do that. And what that does, and this isn't like a fail-safe thing, but believe you me, it's very powerful, and I've seen how powerful it can be. What that does is it puts both of you on the spot, making these statements about what are you really here for? What really are we doing here together today? Now, I would tell you that I believe that we are living within a society right now, in a world right now, where when statements are made that aren't completely truthful, or that have veils of deception, or created entirely out of a place of wanting to deceive, humans are now picking up on that with our little spidey senses all over the place. That's what these last 2 years are about, right? That's what these last 2 years are about. So I do believe, yes, that is something to be concerned about, but I think it's less and less likely now as more of us are waking up. And this idea of people waking up, a lot of people think they're waking up to what these people over here are doing, or what that over there is happening. And this is true. That's a way to describe what it is. But what I really believe is happening with this idea of waking up is you're waking up to the fact that within you are able to detect some of this bullshit. You are able to feel the worthiness, the true nature and character of some things. And it's like a muscle, though. It's like a muscle. You have to begin to use it. You have to begin to trust it. And it's not always 100%, but it's like any muscle. Start using it and it will get better. And things will become more and more clear. As we vibrate higher, we vibrate higher, we take in more light. The things that are dark, the things that are dense, the things that are heavy, that stuff is just kind of like physics, that stuff will start to show itself and it'll start to shake loose and fall away. It really will. It's playing out in this great, grand, big scheme of things, especially in society. But this is what is happening.
Yeah. And speaking of, you call it waking up. I don't necessarily like that term, but like you said, there's limitations in the English language to describe what's actually happening. And as much as I would like to say, like, oh, I was ahead of the curve and I woke up before other people. No, I'm in this big, huge wave of people that quote unquote woke up recently during the last 2 years as well. And it's really interesting that I've run into so many people that are like, oh, I recently discovered I'm a psychic or I'm a medium, and I didn't know about it until 2020 or whatever, or I just got into tarot cards. Even people who, because I grew up Mormon, right? And I live in Utah where there's a ton of Mormons. Even people who were Mormon, like devout, hardcore Mormons, have come to me and they're like, oh, yeah, I got a deck of tarot cards the other day. And I'm like, what? That's wild. So there is this weird waking up thing going on. That's very interesting to talk about. And not many people do talk about it for whatever reason. It's kind of like hush hush, I guess. And I don't know why. It's interesting.
It's social conventions. That whole idea of not talking about it to anyone. I have this story that I like to tell sometimes where I had this fella come down. I remember he was, we do a lot of sessions online these days, but this fella came down from Kansas City. He didn't have too far to go. So he came down to my wellness studio that's here in Wichita. And this guy this was his issue. He had a fine marriage. He had 2 children. He liked his job, but he was waking up. He was becoming more aware about the basic concept of, the expansion of what's really real, what's really reality, what's really consciousness. And his wife was not, or, just not there. She was still in the way he used to be. And this manifested in a really interesting way through their children, right? And he had 2 small children. And what both of these children started doing when they were able to talk, but not yet in school age, both of them started talking about living other lives. And one, I can't remember if it was a past life or another planet life. I'm not exactly sure. One of them was that, but the other one absolutely insisted that the last time they were alive, they lived inside the earth, not on top of it. Right. So here this guy had these 2 small children who are basically, bringing past life memory carryover into their waking conscious state as humans now. And this is becoming more common. But what we're doing as a society is either calling it mental illness or imagination, et cetera, like that. Right. And the biggest issue in this man's mind was he wanted to support his children, and he was doing a pretty good job of doing that. But the disconnect between him and his wife, right? This was the biggest issue, was the disconnect, because her biggest concern was to make them stop doing that, make them stop talking about it, and very quickly before they began telling or talking about it to their friends or getting old enough and going to school and carrying on with that. Her number one primary objective was to shut that down. Let's just shut that down. Let's hurry up and shut that down. She didn't want to experience any of the blowback or any of the questions or any of the, the thing that can happen in group situations where kids get ostracized or made fun of. And the husband, in my view of things, of course, he was a little more circumspect about what was going on here. And he wanted to understand a little bit more about it. And he didn't want to squash these things from his children if this was something that was important to them. And what I will tell you is, I believe that many of us were feeling some of that or experiencing some of that as children. We explain it away. We explain it away as overactive imaginations or sometimes imaginary friends or, things like that. And then the window sort of closes. And this is the whole consciousness exploration thing again, this whole idea. So there's this concept that really you don't begin to step out of the alpha brainwave state, which is a form of light hypnosis. You don't step away from that completely until like you're age 7, right? So there's a lot of that going on as kids, and more these days. So back to your question. I had this conversation with him, and I've had this almost the identical conversation with a number of They feel so all alone. I feel so all alone with my children like this. I can't talk to my wife about it. I can't talk to my neighbor about it. And I remember looking at him and saying, how do you know that your neighbor isn't experiencing the exact same thing? Maybe his boy is from the inner earth and you guys are living next door to each other. And both of you have parents who are going, shh, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Right.
And
Keep it quiet.
Also, I also have this other, it's a kind of a parallel experience of a dude who came, I think he was, what was he? Some sort of very professional guy. It may have been a lawyer or something like that, a very, very stoic, very straight-laced, lace up the boots fella who literally was like looking around the street, before coming into to my studio, making sure, well, who's watching me walk in here? I know, I always find that interesting. And I remember in his experience, he also was feeling very, very alone. A lot of people come to have these sessions because I'm understanding stuff. I'm interested in stuff. Nobody around me is. And then he leaves. And do you know what? I actually and literally get a phone call and have a session with somebody who I'm almost certain was a colleague of theirs sometime later. And some of the same issues came up. I can't talk to anyone about it. Now, because there's client practitioner confidentiality there, I really couldn't say anything. But what I really wanted to do was go, dudes, you're working in the same office. And both of you are saying, I can't talk to anybody about this. Because they're following this convention, these limitations, this thing that was put on them. We can't talk about that. We will be considered crazy.
Yeah, people will think I'm crazy.
Exactly.
You'll think I'm nuts.
Exactly.
And then I'll lose my job and my career and blah, 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 blah.
All of that.
Yeah, I have so I used to work in an office doing sales. And everybody would always talk about sports. And that was your story just reminded me of this. Everybody would just talk about sports all the time. And I remember there was a big gathering of people talking and I was just standing there smiling and nodding yep. They're like LeBron James or Kobe or whatever. I was like, yep. Just sitting there listening. And then someone was like, hey, Ian, you haven't said anything. Do you have anything to say? And I remember this very vividly. I was like, yeah, I do actually. I was like, the U.S. government just admitted that UFOs are real and they're flying around our atmosphere and they don't know what they are. And nobody's talking about it. I would love to talk about that. And then everybody was just like, really? Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, back to sports. And I was like, what? I was like, okay, I'm on that. And I was like, okay, I'm on the outside here. I've never been the one to not talk about this kind of stuff, but I just thought it was so interesting how everybody was just like, oh, really? That's interesting. Okay, back to sports,
I do know. And, I think, you're not alone. I let me commend you for that. I have absolutely no idea what might have transpired subsequently, but that's, what that is planting a seed. So you planted a seed. Now, whether or not that seed took hold in any of those people, who knows, but good for you, because at least some seed planting, we can do some seed planting here and there. We can throw out seeds every once in a while. And that doesn't mean we have to confront anyone. It doesn't mean we have to tell the boys that the sports ball talk is boring you to tears. But I think that's another thing. As difficult. And you're talking, earlier you said anxiety is, of course, mental health, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, drug use, escapism. It's through the roof. Of course it is after the last 2 years, right? But the one benefit, the one good thing, well, I imagine there's more than just one. one of the good things that has come of the last 2 years is how many people I have heard say things like, I just can't do the small talk anymore. I just can't. Right. And that's, that can encompass some things like, the weather or the Kardashians or, sports ball or whatever. There's a lot of people who are going, I can't do that anymore. Now, they may not be ready to talk about the government declassing, the UFO information, but that's one of the steps in cracking that, that worldview, shall we say, right? And it's painful, and it can be very, very painful. And I see more of that coming. A lot of, it's just like, and I understand why you don't like the term waking up. Again, the limitations, but this analogy works. Some people are woken up with, blood curdling scream or explosion or fire in their house. That's a really hard way to wake up. And other people are like, hey, they're woken up kind of like, in a more gentle way. Those kinds of analogies can work. And, in these last couple of years, that was like a really loud alarm clock for a lot of people. But I think there's more coming. I hesitate to predict or make any assumptions about what that is. Let's just call it a gut feeling. The last time I had this gut feeling was somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas time of 2019, when people were talking about, the coming year and everything. And I'm like, I don't know. All I know is chaos, just some sort of chaos. It feels like real chaotic energy to me. And this next thing coming up, I couldn't even tell you when it is. It could be after I'm long since gone, but this next thing seems more like an explosion, right? And that I don't mean to say that it needs to be a physical explosion. It's just a way to describe the energy.
Like a lot of people all at once going like, oh, I'm more than my body right now.
Something like that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because like what I've noticed, and it drives me nuts nowadays, and I don't know why. It's just like this. We'll go back to the sports ball analogy. It's like I want to talk about sports, and I'm like, well, what a waste of time to me. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to talk about dudes running back and forth on a wood floor or whatever. I mean, not that it can't be interesting to watch a competition every once in a while. You know what I mean? But it's like,
I do.
At that office, that's all they talked about. And here I present something that should be kind of concerning. It's like there's literally NASA and the U.S. government released UFO videos and admitted that, yes, these aren't ours and we don't know whose they are and they're real. And then all of a sudden, business as usual, back to sports. And I'm like, what? Okay. I wonder how many of those people years later come to realize that same thing where they're like, I used to love talking about sports.
Yeah.
And now I just want to talk about, we'll just call it spirituality for lack of a better term. It's really interesting to me. Actually, one of those people came to me for a session. I know at least one of them was like, oh, I'm kind of like woken up now. Right. And it's interesting that you say that there's going to be an explosion, because right now it's almost like a drip. There's just like a steady drip of people it's like someone turning on a faucet. It started like, I want to say it started back in the 60s almost with like little drips, drip, drip. And then it started getting like a little stream, and it's just, eventually it's going to be like a fire hydrant exploding water, to use analogies.
Yep. And we're going to seem like the crazies. One of the situations I find happening in my life right now is I'm in my basement right now, my little basement recording studio, but upstairs is my 91-year-old dad. And he was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam days. And man, does he have stories. But I vividly remember growing up, and he served 2 tours in Vietnam and was shot down, by the way, and rescued. got out of it in an extraordinary way. But he used to rail and rail and rail about some of his higher ups and the defense secretary and some other things like that. And he sounded like a crazy man to me. He sounded like a crazy man. Why? Because he was saying things that Walter Cronkite was not saying, and that none of the neighbors or none of the neighbors' kids or that any of my teachers were mentioning or anything like that. And he got some details wrong, but it took me until the fairly recent, times to realize that he saw through some of the setup of what that conflict was. That's what he was doing. He saw it and he explained it. He didn't quite understand it, and he might have misattributed who was doing the bad thing or whatever, but he saw what it was. He saw that it was manufactured. It wasn't what they were saying it was, right? But he looked like, and all the way into my adulthood, I just thought of my dad as sort of, he used to do those crazy rants, right? So, and it's this way that when you haven't accepted something, it's the way you deal with the person over there that says something, right? So the sports ball guys heard you say that, and they heard those words, and they planted a seed, right? It's just like my dad's seed when he was railing against what was happening, in the late 1960s in Vietnam. And even as a kid, even as a 7-year-old kid, that planted a little seed in my brain that didn't germinate until much, much later. Looking at the different conflicts and really now beginning to completely understand how so much of what we are fed as reality is simply manufactured. And of course, that can go down the whole, conspiracy theory way of looking at everything, which is only a minor part of what's going on, just a minor part. It's just another kind of step in or another piece of the whole puzzle thing, but it can be an important piece for some people who are coming into themselves, right? It can be the way they're getting woken up into understanding and seeing how really spectacular and limitless we can be once we see past these things that are presented to us as, unassailable bits of our reality that cannot be questioned. Well, we all should be questioning everything. Everybody, my favorite thing in the world is to be questioned. That's why I'm truly enjoying this interview with you, because already, a couple of the things that you've posed are sort of, well, let's just see if we can poke a hole in that over there, and I think that's great, because once you can see that, once you can see sort of the edges of anything, of any construct, you can begin to see if there's some place to go that's beyond it or behind it.
Yeah. And to any skeptics listening to this, here's what I would pose to you. Think about the amount of light that your human eyes can't see. We see an incredibly small sliver of light with our human eyes. And think about all the super low frequencies that you can't hear with your ears and the super high frequencies that you can't hear with your ears. All those are still part of reality, like the infrared, the ultraviolet, all that light. We can't see it, but it still exists. And that's still an incredibly small sliver of reality that exists that we can't experience without tools. And so my question or my challenge to any skeptics, because I know that you're out there, I know that there's some skeptics out there that listen to this show, is to challenge your worldview a little bit and say, what else might exist out there that I can't see without tools? And with that, Candace, I'm going to say, let's talk about what you've got going on. Let's talk about your website, your course, all that stuff. Where can people get a hold of you? Where can people sign up to be in your directory? Where can people sign up to take your wonderful class to become a BQH practitioner?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be allowed to tell people that. So first of all, the main website, quantumhealers.com, welcomes healers and energy workers of all kinds, whether traditionally focused or more open-minded and expansive focused like BQH. We have lots and lots of people there who do all kinds of energy work, Reiki practitioners, cranial sacral therapists, EFT practitioners, all of that. Quantumhealers.com. This is a place for people to come who offer these alternative healing or non-conventional, non-traditional healing or energy or consciousness exploration modalities. It's kind of like a Yellow Pages. You can go there and you can list your services, but beyond that, we have a community. And this, Ian, I love that you reached out to talk to me because, I really don't know. I keep saying this next thing that I'm going to say because it's true, but I'm also always asking and looking. What I say is quantumhealers.com. It's really the only group and the only place on the internet like it that I'm aware of, which is hundreds and hundreds of practitioners are there and supporting each other without a single guru, without a single modality, without a single set of parameters of you got to do this way or believe in this way, or it's horizontal support, right? So this is a place where an EFT practitioner can listen to a regressionist's summary of a session and maybe have something to say about anything, right? The approach or maybe offer some suggestions or anything like that, where we can come together like that without somebody saying, no, you can't do that, or no, that's wrong, or this isn't the way it's done, or anything like that. So it's this open-minded, very freely helpful community of energy and healing practitioners that we get together in that way. So it's a directory and it's also a support. And then we also offer classes, and among them, of course, BQH is able to be found there at quantumhealers.com. And BQH, the class, runs online, and it's available whenever you are ready to take it on demand. But also, we have an opportunity. It's ended up being about 3 times a year where I open up my wellness studio here in Kansas for those who want an immersive experience after taking the class. So we get together. The next class is in June. There's still a few spots left. And this is where people who've already taken the online BQH class can come together and sort of practice, experiment, powwow, see how we can expand the limitations. That happens. And what I'm really excited to talk about is our event that's coming up starting Monday, April 11th. We call it Quantum Realms 2022. What is Quantum Realms? Well, it used to be called Worldwide Regression Week, but because I just knew it could have a better name and I wanted to have a more expansive idea of what this actually was, we call it Quantum Realms now, and it's our 5th year. What is it? Well, it's YouTube. On our YouTube channel, we have speakers, thought leaders, metaphysical and spiritual and energy healing practitioners of all kinds who come together and talk about this year's theme, which is integrity, power, and truth. And so I invite you all to find us. You can find us by just going to quantumhealers.com and scrolling down and clicking that, YouTube icon to find our channel. Quantumhealers.com will get you to all of our spaces.
All right, that's wonderful. Definitely, if you're drawn to Candace, if you're drawn to Dolores Cannon, her energy is definitely alive with Candace. Head on over to quantumhealers.com. Check out Quantum Realm starting as of this episode's release tomorrow on Monday on YouTube, and that's a week long, right?
It is absolutely a week long. And thanks for once again mentioning Dolores, because every year Quantum Realms is actually held and celebrated on Dolores Cannon's birthday, which is April 15th. So yes, one whole week. And we have some really wonderful speakers. We have Allison Coe, we have Jessica Del Mar, we have Alba Wyman, and we have David Manning, we have Andrew Martin, we have Patricia Corey, who's written several books. You might recognize some of those names, and then some names you might not recognize. And look for us again, of course, next year at this time. And if you are practicing this work, or you would just be interested in maybe learning about what some of these people do out there these days, you might enjoy it. Different kinds of talk other than sports ball, Ian?
Thank goodness. Well, links to those are going to be in the description. Again, quantumhealers.com, where you can find out all about Candace Craw-Goldman and her mission and what she's got going on. And Candace, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, do you have a message that you'd like to leave for my audience?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, wow. So the energy really shifted. Ian, when the energy shifts like this in a session, I can feel it in my throat because I know but I can also feel it around me. So you asked that question, and what happens instantly is I felt throughout my whole space here, I felt almost like Star Trek when the
I get
when
what
the things come down, right? So instantly, I'm feeling, and I'm filled with goosebumps. I'm filled with goosebumps, and I'm getting a little emotional right now, because what happened when you asked that question was my team just solidly popped in, and it's very, very clear what they want me to say, which is, for those of you out there, and I know you're out there, for those of you out there who are struggling right now and are watching some of the things going on our planet that are not easy to watch, and are going through things that are some of the most difficult things that humans can face, having a human life. I want you to know that you can't even imagine the energies, the beings, the worlds in this cosmos that are watching what's playing out on this planet right now. And they are bowing down to you, and they are thanking you for your mere presence of being here, even if you're just sitting on the sofa. Even if you are just sitting on the sofa, the love in your heart matters. It means something. And it's part of how we're going to lift this world into the next place. So they are all bowing to you and thanking you for being here now.
Well, thank you so much, Candace. And thank your team for stepping in. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on my show and talk with me and share your message. And once again, head on over to quantumhealers.com for anything Candace Craw-Goldman. Candace, thanks again for coming on my show.
Thank you, Ian. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
That's it for today's episode. I would like to thank Candace for coming on to the show. I would like to thank you for tuning in. Once again, head over to quantumhealers.com, where you can check out all that Candace has got going on. You can check out her YouTube channel for Quantum Realms starting tomorrow, Monday, April 11th. So check that out. Head on over to my Facebook group if you want to interact with me and some others in the community. I post a lot of stuff over there. I've also got a subreddit. I've got a Twitter that I don't really use, but whatever. And I would love to interact with you guys. If you want to come on the show, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com, and I would love to have you on the show.
Can you see beyond your mind? Can you shed a light on the treasure that you are? Can you be at ease for a moment? Can you feel that peace and its owning everything that you are?
you could like pick any superpower for like no limits, you just get a power, what would you pick?
Oh, that's such a great question. And of course, there's like so many, but I think probably because of what I've been doing all of these years, I think what I would literally like to do is have, a time machine. I mean, I already have a time machine anyway, really doing this work. I mean, this is what we do, but I mean, maybe more fleshed out, like really, really be able to pick timelines or to go back into time or to go forward into time using a time machine, but maybe not just like for my own persona, but for other personas too. And again, this is something that we do in this work, at least on some level as well.
Okay. So you get this time machine.
Mm-hmm.
Are you traveling with your body physically back, or are you traveling with your mind to just simply experience the experiences of others, but in a more full conscious way? So you could go back and experience a T-Rex's life from the day it hatches from its egg all the way down till it dies.
Yeah.
And then you, okay. See, that's interesting, because most people are like, I want a time machine. But you could go back in time and you're just like, oh, I'm going to stomp on this butterfly right now. And then all of a sudden you get the butterfly effect.